Hey there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as LevDev, and I decided to. First of all, I want to update with an apology for no new videos last week. Last week turned out to be one of the busiest weeks that I had currently in quite a while regarding to life stuff. Pretty much just having to help out with Halloween event shenanigans, tournament shenanigans, and just essentially just going around pretty much helping people out with what they need and such. So forgive me for not any new video content, but the other thing that kept me occupied was checking up on what BlizzCon had to offer. And of course, as this video entails, one of the new themes is the reveal of the new Hearthstone expansion coming in December, which is the Rastakhan Rumble, which is an expansion based on pretty much the trolls essentially and them going through a combat arena, an all-out arena brawl with Loas and all variety of shenanigans. So they revealed 16 cards so far. I'll get to the new mechanics in the set once we reveal the cards that have specifically those new mechanics. I'll get this done real quick. One thing I did try to do with this video is before taking my first take, I decided to go around and see what people's take are on the cards, since mostly it seems like commentary I've been getting from friends and associates about my videos with card evaluations is that I'm not 100% great on them. I still want to take my 2 cents on it, but I did decide to first scout and look at other people's opinions so I don't make a guess like saying pre-nerf Giggly the Venture was not a really great card, and well, we all know pretty much how that prediction was wrong. So, and to be fair, most predictions, everybody's going to get one card wrong sooner or later. So, now that we got that little hyperbole out of the way, let's actually get on to the 16 cards revealed. One of the ones they revealed was for Rogue, which is a 6-mana spell, which, let's be frank, it sits to 3 mana if you use Prep. Cannon Barrage, it's an epic spell. Deal 3 damage to a random enemy, repeat for each of your pirates. So, the magical Christmas land, Christmas scenario is like, oh, I'm going to have 7 pirates on the field, cast this spell, and then deal 21 random damage in intervals of 3 to the opponents and their minions. Now, that's kind of best case scenario. To be fair, the power level of this card is going to be very dependent on how consistent you can have pirates on the battlefield. So we have to both see from the set if there's going to be enough pirates in general to be played, but I also say enough way to keep our pirates to be sticky, for lack of a better word. There are some cards that do generate pirates and such, or even there is a decent amount of pirate pools from the classic set and even some of the current standards expansions and such, but I don't think it's enough to make this card tempting at the moment. I do think, since it seems that I think the Loa for the Rogue class is going to be Sharks, and it's going to be pirate-based theme from what it looks like. I think we are going to get an addition of new pirates, and as long as we have any that's sticky, I do think the power level of this card is there. Especially, I think the minimal you want with this card is to, at the very least, have 3 pirates on the battlefield so you can deal like 12 damage to a random opponent in intervals of 3. I mean, it'll feel bad if you don't have any pirates and this is just 6 mana, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. But still, the power level is there. Plus, it's going to be kind of funny to see if pirates is actually a powerful enough theme for Rogue, which there are cards to support it, especially in Kingsbane Rogue, how they use pirates and such. So, it's a card to keep an eye out on, but really, the power level of the card is going to be determined on, can you make a pirate-based Rogue deck, and can you make the pirates sticky enough to make this really effective spell for the deck. Next up is actually a legendary they revealed for Mage, which the legendary cycle they're doing for this expansion is they're doing 2 legendaries. One, it's going to be the legendary Loa, which is kind of like an animal beast spirit god, essentially. And then the legendary troll that's associated with the Loa. And they showed the legendary troll for Mage, which is Hex Lord Malkras. It's an 8 mana 5/5, stats are kind of but it has a really nifty battle cry, which is add a copy of your opening hand to your hand, except this card. which is obvious why they put that little semi-clause in there. It's so that you don't go infinite with Headslord Maraclass drawing at most 3 to 4 cards consistently. So, this card is actually a very fascinating power card because it's kind of one of those ones where it's going to make people into better players in the sense that they have to really determine the value of their starting hand. Like, do you want a hand that's just on curve, or do you want to have a card that is significantly powerful since you know you have this card in your deck that have an additional copy in your hand thanks to this card? Now, the one thing I don't know yet, and people could correct me in the comments down below, I don't know if the opening hand includes the coin if you're going second. So, if somebody actually figured out the semi-clause for that and figure out if you're going to get the coin or not, I would actually appreciate that because I don't exactly know about that. But if it does have the coin, that would actually be significantly very powerful since it does allow you additional mana and such if you're going second. Still, though, this is going to be a card that I think is going to be decent in either mid-range or even control mages. I would be surprised if this sees play in tempo or aggro mages. Though on the other side of the coin, an additional arcane missile or an additional bolt might be the necessary spell you need to deal lethal damage, so that's a thought to consider. Overall, really good legendary for mage. It's actually pretty powerful, all things considered. Next up is Pyromaniac, a mage rare, which is a 3 mana 3/4. Whenever your hero power kills a minion, draw a card. Now, 3 mana 3/4, really good stat-wise. It's good in trades, it sticks on the board pretty consistently if you play it right on curve, and the ability in itself makes it actually very decent for, I would say, in an arena, since it helps you. The stats are good, and also the hero power, which you're usually going to use to trade into minions and kill minions off. Getting a card draw out of it is actually really good. In Constructed, this is going to be a big maybe, because the free drop is very heavily contested in Mage at the moment. Plus, also the factor is they have other elements of card draw engines, such as with a Lunef and all other card draw engines that Mage have currently at the moment. It makes this card a little interesting. On one hand, people like to play the Acolyte of Plane for card draw since they can use their hero power for that. But on the other hand, I think this is a lot better than Acolyte of Pain since you don't give the opponent the ability to overdraw you. And it's more proactive to help you control the board and such, since you use your hero power to attack the minions and, reduce their health and such. Overall, I think this is a good value-based minion. It's going to be very competitive in Constructed because currently the free slot is very, very stacked, so it'll be interesting to see. Maybe an odd mage, I would say, but that's a big maybe. Though, I do have to admit, the temptation of getting Frostlet's Jaina out and then both making an elemental and drawing a card is actually kind of tempting. Next up, Reign of Toads, a Shaman common card, which says, summon 3/2/4 Toads with Taunt, Overload 3. Honestly, this is just a really decent common. It's one of those where the Overload 3 is significant, but the 2/4 taunts are actually very proactive in stats. 2 attack is very decent, plus you have things to... It's pretty much a late game, get very sticky taunts that you can either use defensively against mid-range minions, or aggressively if you have like a Bloodlust or a way to flip their health around and such, flip their attacking health. And the Overload freeze, so you are spending kind of in a sense 9 mana to an extent. I mean, there are people that are comparing this to Spreading Plague, which I don't know if that's really a good clause, because one, it's always going to stay free, and if the board is wide enough, then this card might not be the best Spreading Plague, but I do think it's actually a really good card to, say, get off of the Shaman hero, oh, I'm forgetting her name, which would, the one where when you play a minion, you summon a random spell. So, when that happens, and getting this off, it's actually pretty good in the late game and such. So, overall, I think that's kind of what's good about this card. It's not a bad card to get from the quote-unquote random spell hero power. But, whether you put this in your deck or not is really dependent on if you're think the main question I'm asking myself is, do you play this in Token Shaman? Like, even Shaman is a possibility since they do like to try to get the board wide for Bloodlust shenanigans, and this does give you a defensive way to make your board go wide, so it's a thought. Overall, I think the card is fine. I do see how not many people are impressed by it at the moment, but I do think this is a card that might be a potentially a little bit of a sleeper of the set because, well, in even Shaman, it has a potential power curve to it. Next off, the Baited Arrow, a 5 mana Hunter spell, deal free damage, Overkill, summon a 5/5 Devilsaur. Now, Overkill is a new mechanic in the set, and what Overkill basically amounts to is this. If you deal any damage excess to the minion's health if you kill a minion with it, so let's say in this case you're dealing free damage, if the minion you are doing the free damage to has 2 to 1 health, then the overkill trigger will affect since you're dealing damage over the health, and the effect will happen, which in this case is summon a 5/5 Devilsaur, which is pretty powerful actually. I mean, a 5 mana 5/5 is interesting. Like, if you look at it as a 5 mana 5/5 deal 2 damage to kill an enemy minion, that's actually pretty good. But it is kind of one of those ones where it's like, I am curious to see if this sees play in like Spell Hunter, because there are ways to essentially get the minion to. This one's a hard one to analyze at first, because on one hand, 5 mana, that's kind of a really high cost, and the board state at that moment could be where it's really hard to get the overkill trigger. However, you could still trade with your minions, but on the other hand, do we have enough spell-generated minions to make the trade if we played it in Spell Hunter? I think the answer to that is yes, but that's debatable. It could also maybe see play in non-Spell Hunter type decks, because one of the tempting thoughts is maybe if you have like a damage dealt to, say, your Devilsaur Egg, and then you decide to Baited Arrow your own Devilsaur Egg, you get 2 5/5s, which actually gives you significant board presence. That's something to consider. Overall, I think the card is fine, but I don't think it's anything to write home about. I think it can be easily cut it out of decks and such, but I do think it's going to be toyed with within the first week of the meta, because it is a very tempting card to get a 5 mana 5/5 that deals lethal damage to a 2 or less health minion. When you look at it that way, the card's actually pretty decent. Good arena card, though. I will say that right off the bat. Next up, the Shirpin Fan, a 1 mana 1/1 beast with Rush. And its battle cry, add a 1/1 links with Rush to your hand. Now, this card I'm going to keep my eye out on. It's a common, so it's nothing to write home about, but I do like the factor that it can be used in, say, the Quest Hunter, since it's a 1 mana minion. So a 1 mana generate another 1 mana card to play to help complete the crest is always something to keep your eye out for. Like, the closest card this has comparison to is essentially the little. Oh, wow, I am legitimately having the morning of brain farts on names. But it's essentially the classic card that we. Not the classic, but the card we play where it's the 1 mana 1/2 that summons another 1 mana 1/2 elemental. I am legitimately surprised I'm forgetting its name at the moment. But anyway, that one. And that one, the 1/2 stats on that one is really good to help with early game trades and such. But this one, you get the benefit of Rush, which could be significant if you need to do like a quick pointed damage to help with an efficient trade. But it could also be useful with, say, cards like the 4 mana 2/4 that essentially gives, whenever you play 1 cost minion that has 1 attack, or it could just be 1 cost minion, it gives that minion poisonous. So looking at this as a way to be like, okay, you have the minion on the field, you play this, you have a Rush poisonous, that can efficiently trade with some minions very significantly. Plus, I think just the fact that it adds a card into your hand is something to consider, and it's also a beast, so we got to keep in mind the beast triggers that we have in Hunter. Also, this with the Death Knight Hunter, and just combining it with a variety of other beasts to make the Build-A-Beast shenanigans, that is something to consider. But overall, I think this card is just a really decent common. I think it will be fun to see this in Quest Hunter, but it'll be interesting to see its other applications if people find it. But I don't think it's a card that's going to be an auto-include in every deck, in my personal opinion. Next off is the Savage Stryker. A 2 mana 2 free with a battle cry, deal damage to an enemy minion equal to your hero's attack. Honestly, this is the epiphany of a decent card. It's a 2 mana 2 free, which we don't mind that stats, and it has a spell that's on the battle cry, which in this case is Savagery. Which, hey, Savage Stryker, Savagely. Ah, there's the pun there. Now, Savagely as a spell is something you don't really want to include in your deck, but having a 2 mana 2 free that has that spell is something to consider. I mean, it's one of those it's nice to see that Blizzard are introducing these type of cards to help with early game kind of like plays and such, to help encourage early game Druid rather than the consistently Druid playstyle that we've been seeing at the moment, which is ramp, play to the combo that they have, and then kill the opponent. So maybe trying to introduce these early game Druids kind of cards is something to consider. Now, really, the efficiency of this card is going to be dependent on the hero attack, and if there are ways to get the attack to be significantly up early game or even mid range, like late game or such, or mid game and such. And there is that the case with the current expansion. This is a card to keep an eye out for. Still, very decent arena card, I'll say. And of course, with the Druid Death Knight with Malfurion, having this late game and being like you do your hero power, and then this is a 2 mana 2 free that deals free damage to a random enemy minion, that's good. Overall, I say this is a really decent minion. Next up is the Void Contract. And this card is weird. It's an 8 mana spell for a Warlock that says destroy half of each player's deck. Now, the first thing that I've been seeing, many people are looking at this card and they're like, oh, this is finally the card to give Warlock a way to combat against combo decks that doesn't rely on the luck of the coin of, say, like Nosferatu, and then just hoping that you mill their essential combo piece. And this is like a Nosferatu where you take half their deck, and hopefully the half the deck you take is the opponent's card that's necessary for their combo. That's a thing to consider, but I do think people need to remember one teensy little fact that I think people are forgetting that does make this card really tricky to play. Remember, it says each player. So, while you are taking half of the opponent's resource, you are also taking half of your resource too. You got to consider that as a significant cost. Because, like, if you're going against, say, a control matchups are very resource dependent, like with their decks and such. And you could think in logic like, oh, I destroy half their deck, and then I destroy half my deck, so I destroy half their resources. But you also destroy half your resources. And the factor is the half is going to be randomized. So you might accidentally leave your opponents with their better options within their deck, while maybe your best options are taken out. Like, if someone played the spell and accidentally destroyed, say, their Death Knight Gul'dan, that's going to feel really, really bad. I mean, really bad. Really, really bad. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. I think many people are thinking that this will see play in control decks, and while that is a statistical possibility, especially if combo decks are still popular within the rotation when this set comes out, but you gotta keep in mind that cost. That cost is significant. And if there is a deck that I think this will see best play in, it's an overall, maybe even Warlock, because they usually keep their value generalized and such. It's a deck that has to essentially, when playing this card, realize that they overall have value cards that, if some of them get destroyed, they can at least rely on the other half and such. So they shouldn't rely on like an overpowered legendary like, say, Gul'dan and such. So maybe a mid-range minion-based Warlock deck can play this, or maybe like a. It's really a weird card. I think it's one of those cards that's going to be either see a lot of play or see little to no play, because Remember, destroying half your deck is a significant cost. Now, a good counter argument I will mention before I move on is that people will mention since Warlock has ways to aggressively draw, that the cost of destroying half their deck is not that significant since mostly presuming the draw engine on the opponent is an average draw engine, in theory they're going to have most of their more cards destroyed from their deck than your deck in theory. But I don't know. I still think that is something to be cautious about because, yeah, less of your cards will be destroyed if you drawed most of them. But that does also mean a higher percentage of very high value based cards being destroyed in your deck compared to the opponent. So, something to consider. I'll say that. And also, I need to remember that these arrows can actually help me scroll through the cards real quick. Anyway, next up is the Paladin Epic, the Immortal Prelate. A 2-mana 1/3 with Death Rattle. Shuffle this into your deck. It keeps any enchantments. Now, this card I really like because I like to play Quest Paladin a lot. You know, Buff Paladin, Kaleidosaur, all that stuff. And this is a really nice value-based minion in those type of decks. Like, putting a Stegodon on this and then making a 2-mana... Okay, I need to remember the stats. 3/7 that summons a 2/6 taunt, and then when it dies, oh, it shuffles it into the deck so you can have it again. And Blessing the Keys on this to be like a 2-mana 5/7 that essentially just when it dies, it shuffles back in and you can get a 2-mana 5/7. That's very significant. Also, keep in mind it says enchantments, so it's also creature-based enchantments as well. So if you use like a Northshire or a Sunshire Cleric or, say, a Fungalmancer on this, it'll keep its stats as well. Keep in mind, though, also negative-based enchantments could also stick on this. So let's say if someone casts a Corruption on this. As far as this card is worded, but I could be wrong, when this card dies, and the copy you get, it will still have the copy of Corruption on it, so when you play it, it's just going to die next turn and then shuffle back into your deck, which kind of stinks, in my opinion. But on the other hand, if you, say, put Stegodon on this, then, hey, a 2-mana dies next turn to summon a taunt, it's an interesting tech card, I'll say that. It's a very powerful card. I would be surprised if this doesn't see play in Buff Paladin, because Buff Paladin will take high advantage of this. I like this card a lot. It's a really fun card. Now, whether or not Buff Paladin's going to be a Fiend post-rotation, well, we'll wait and see. Next up, Surrender to Madness. So it seems like Priest's kind of Loa is going to be based on Madness, or maybe even correlated if this looks like a bird of some sort. So what this spell does, sorry, brain fart there. It's a 3-mana spell. Destroy 3 of your mana crystals. Give all your minions in your deck +2/+2. Now, at first, people are looking at this card and being like, okay, this is more decent in a zoo deck kind of scenario, because we've been all used to the Prince Keliseth early game 2, play your Prince Keliseth, give all your minions buff, and then be able to efficiently keep board presence and such with your buffed up minions. However, I'm going to make one counter argument here. I think this is more decent late game in a Dragons deck, because having the buffed up stats for your dragons is really, really potentially powerful. And we already have enough of dragon-based control tools and such that are still currently in the meta, that I do think giving the ability to... You could still use your dragons to control for late game, then you can play Surrender to Madness safely, since on like turn 7 or turn 10, losing 3 mana is not that significant, especially if your dragon-based curve is decent. And having, say, like, oh, let's say a Fairy Dragon, having a 2-mana 6/4 with can't be targeted by spells? That's very powerful. I mean, there are some dragons where if you're giving that stat buff, can be very, very significant. Oh, wait a minute, I think it's 2-mana 5/4, but you kind of get my point there. So I think this is more a secret tech card in dragon decks, so keep that in mind. Now, the temptation is to play it in zoo decks or even control-based decks to help make a better minion advantage late game. So, I think this card might see play, but there is also the fact that destroying 3 of your mana crystals is kind of the significant cost early game, but later not that much of a cost uh, late game, but significant cost early game. So it'll be interesting to see if this card sees play. I do like the flavor of it though. Next up is actually the Loa for Warlock, which is Hirek the Bat. And it is a 8 mana 1/1, which is a beast, and it has a battle cry. Fill your board with copies of this minion. So, if you have an empty board and you play this, you get an 8 mana, summon your board with a bunch of 1/1s. So, this is kind of like an Onexia without the 8/8. Now, some of you might be looking at it being like, why do I want to fill up my board with 1/1s which can easily be defiled? Which is a very true assessment. But one thing you'll see with Warlock and such, with the Spirit card that they have, is that they're actually trying to encourage like hand buffing your minions within Warlock and such. And we have cards like Soul Infusion and such, and even one card we'll see later that helps buff minions in your hand. So, let's say this gets Soul Infusion. So 8 mana, fill the board with 3/3s. Okay, that's decent. Let's say you Soul Fusion again. Oh, fill your board with 5/5s. That's actually really powerful. So, I think this is a card that will be very powerful in hand buff Warlock type of decks. Now, whether or not that's going to be a very supported archetype is up to debate, so it'll be interesting to see. Also, one thing to keep in mind, this is a beast, which I don't know if Warlock will get any, or if there's any normal cards that have beast interactions, but it's something to be considerate about. I'm not sure if it's going to be overall powerful, but it is something to keep in the back of your head, just in case for potential powerful synergies. But overall, I think this is a card that if Hand Warlock is powerful enough, that it might see play, but we really gotta wait and see. Now, one card to help support that legendary is the Spirit of the Bat. Now, the Spirit is a new sub-mechanic in the set, and what this mechanic essentially amounts to is that each class is going to have a Spirit, which is going to be a 0/3 that's going to have Stealth for 1 turn, but in exchange for the stats being a 0/3 and only Stealth for 1 turn, it gets a significantly powerful effect that's supposed to, quote-unquote, change the tide of battle, as they say in the flavor, but it's supposed to give you a significantly powerful effect. Now, this one gives you the effect that after a friendly minion dies, give a minion in your hand +1/+1. So, as you can see, they're trying to encourage the hand buffing mechanic in Warlock and such. Now, overall, this card is decent. The fact that you can play it early game for 2 mana, and you can play like a 1 mana minion and then play 2 mana this, and then just trade in with your 1 mana minion. That's something to consider, and then just get a temporary stat bust. But even this mid game is decent if you have already a board presence and you know you're going to trade. But also a thing that people need to keep in mind, this is also pretty decent in, say, matchups where you have to play a Defile and you need a free health minion. This is just decent as a free health minion. And then you just play this, play your Defile, your minions will die, hopefully first and such, which then trigger off the effect of Spirit of the Bat. And then hopefully you get at least 1 or 2 triggers off and then clear the board while having buffed up minions that you can play either during that turn or next turn. So I do think that is something to consider. Overall, this is definitely a good tool to make hand buff Warlock a thing, but whether or not it's going to be enough, we have to wait and see. Next up is another Spirit for Rogue, which is Spirit of the Shark. A 4 mana 0/3, stealth for 1 turn. Your minions' battle cries and combos trigger twice. Now remember, it says your minions. So don't go at this first and be like what I did when I was like, oh wait, Eviscerate can now deal 8 damage. No. It's only your minions. So for damage-based combos, think like, say, SI Agent essentially now being able to deal 4 damage with its combo than its usual 2 damage. So stuff like that. Now essentially this is now another class that has the ability to have their battle cries trigger twice. Shaman technically has one, which is the Murmuring Elemental, if I remember correctly the name of it. Now, Rogue has that ability, but also the thing is, Shaman, it only affects one of their minions. This one, as long as the minion sticks on the field, spilled with Shark, all your minions' battle cries and combos will trigger twice, which can end up for some very silly shenanigans. Like, if there's any minions that help summon a pirate that come from this set, this is a card to keep your eye out for say, Cannon Barrage to help get more pirates on the field and such. But even cards that we have in general with their combo triggering offs, like, yes, the battle cries is something to consider, especially in Rogue, since we do have some powerful battle cries and such. But that combo is something that we're going to talk about at the moment, because battle cries triggering twice, we kind of know the power of that effect. We've seen it with Brand Bronzebeard, we've seen it in Shaman currently in the standard. We know the power of battle cries. Now let's think about the factor of combos triggering twice. We mentioned the SI Agent example, but there's also powerful ones such as, say, for example, there's a lot of good minion-based combo minions. Like, the one I can think of right off the bat is the one where it's the combo effect happens and you draw 2 minion cards from your deck. Having this in the field and being able to draw 4 minions, that's really powerful. Also, there's stuff cards like, say, maybe there's I need to look at all the combos again to see the power level of this card. I think really that's where the power of this card is going to lie. If the combo minions that we get from this set and also in current standard set are powerful enough to take advantage of this card. However, the one main weakness to this card is it's a 4 mana 0/3, which right at the turn when you play this at 4 mana, it is very prone to popular board wipes in the meta, like Mage, board wipe pretty much kills this card with the exception of Blizzard. So you have to be able to place this very carefully on your battlefield so it doesn't get like meteored out or something like that. So that's something to consider. But also like Hellfire, and there's just a lot of board wipes that during that kind of like turn where if you play this on turn 4, it might get easily removed. So be very cautious, but the power level of this card is there if it sticks. The keyword is if it sticks. Next up, the legendary Loa for Paladin, which is Servala the Tiger. A 25 mana minion, that's a 7/5. Okay, people are looking at it being like, what? Just wait a minute. It has Divine Shield, Lush, and Lifesteal, and it costs 1 less for each mana you spent on spells. Now, for the record, it means spells you spent this game. So, for example, if you spend like 8 mana on spells, then it will go down to essentially 17, and then vice versa and vice versa. The more mana you spend on spells, the cheaper it's going to get for the rest of the game. And then you might have a point where if you played enough spells, that it's going to be like 0 mana and such, which is really powerful. Now, this one's going to be very dependent on if you can play enough spells in a Paladin deck to be able to both, I would say, keep control of the battlefield, keep a board presence, and also be able to draw into this. I think the power level is there, especially since we have echo spells such as the Greening Bell and such to essentially that we can play multiple times. The one meme thought that people have been thinking about is with Prophetic Prism, how you can draw this with Prophetic Prism and have a cheap spell like a Secret and such, and then have like a 1 mana Shivala, and then have a 25 mana Secret that's going to be a dead card in your hand for the rest of the game. It's a meme card, but it's something to consider. It's definitely a synergy there that even at worst, if you don't draw it, it still removes 4 from the mana cost, so... But the minion itself, I would say at 6 to 5 mana is really powerful. 7/5 Divine Shield, Rush, and Lifesteal. That gives you 7 health, that helps you trade in with a minion. And you still have a 7/5 on the battlefield that's going to have to trade with stuff that still gives you the life gain and such. So overall, this card is really powerful, but it will be very dependent on if it's spell-centric Paladin deck or... It's really dependent on how many spells you have to play to make this effective. And if the amount of spells that you have to play that make it effective can still make an efficient deck type in Paladin. So, we're gonna have to wait and see. But the power level is there, and the life gain from this legendary beast is significant. Especially if you play this in a deck with Zilliats as well, so you can hopefully gain up to like 14 life, or even technically speaking, 19 if you think about it, since people will have to potentially trade into this to kill it. Next card is Shirpin Fan, a 2-mana 2/2. After your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 pirate. Now, many people are comparing this to Hinge Clan Thug, which I can see the comparison there, but I do think Hinge Clan Thug is just a teeny little bit better, since it's a 3-mana free that when you attack with a weapon, you actually do get a stat boost, which then becomes a 4/4, which is harder to trade in. But this doesn't really get a stat boost. It's just going to be a 2-mana 2/2 no matter what, that will, if you be able to attack with a weapon, you then be able to summon a pirate. Which, there is power there, especially if Cannon Barrage, if we need to find ways to get sticky pirates and such. But it's a 2-mana 2/2. It can easily be traded in. I don't know about this card. This is a card where I think it's potentially powerful, but it's also potentially very weak because it can be easily traded in. But on the other side of the coin, if you play this with a weapon equip and then attack and then have a 1/1, you at least still have a 1/1 pirate on the field, which might be the sticky pirates that we need, so I don't know. This is a card that I think potentially it's not that powerful, but I could see myself being wrong very easily. It's definitely a fun card, I'll say that. And the last card they revealed from the BlizzCon is Sophrase. I do not know how to pronounce this. Sophrase. Somebody's going to tell me I mispronounced this. It's a 6-mana 4/4 weapon with Overkill. You may attack again. Now, most people are looking at this card and they're thinking of this as a significant board wipe. Like, oh hey, if you have like a bunch of low health minions, you can play Sophrase and then attack all the minions and then do a board wipe. And that is something to consider, but many things that the streamers are pointing out, and I'm grateful they pointed this out, is this is also a decent aggressive weapon as well, since you can both use it to trade into a taunt, and then once you kill the taunt minion, if the overkill trigger happens, then you can attack into the opponent's face, which dealing 4 damage to the opponent's face and eliminating a minion for 2 times in theory, presuming that this doesn't get a weapon buff or anything, is significantly powerful. So, this is a really powerful weapon. I think it will see play. I would be surprised if it didn't. Overall, though, that's the cards they revealed so far. I'm going to end the video real quick. I'll try to get through with these next week videos being kind of like, since we're still waiting for the spoiler schedule to be revealed and such, to be working more on the Witchwood cards, like design a deck around shenanigans. I've been trying to do one for Toki Time Tinker because I kind of like that card, even though the card's not that great. But I'll try to get that out on Thursday and then do an MTG Arena video on Friday and such. That's just a quick shenanigans. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to watch this video and such, or brain fart, sorry. It's been early Sunday morning here. But if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and all the usual YouTube notification shenanigans that they've been telling us that we have to say. So, I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out.